Arizona Territory, 1883. Lydia Rowan tore across the moonlit desert with two orphaned children in her arms, while the drunken outlaw Buck Harlan thundered after them, yelling that he would take back what's his. Dust clawed her throat, Tommy was sobbing, and Mira kept whispering she couldn't run anymore. Lydia stumbled, nearly falling, and for one terrifying heartbeat, she believed this was how she would die, alone, hunted, forgotten, just like every other time help never came. Maybe the world was never meant to save a woman like me, she thought as Buck's shadow fell over them. Before we continue, if you're watching this from anywhere in the world, leave your city name in the comments. I want to see how far this story travels. Lydia Rowan ran like the earth was breaking open behind her. The night was dry, wind scraping dust across the flats of southern Arizona, and she held Mira with one arm, dragged little Tommy with the other. The children gasped and stumbled, their small boots slapping the dirt. Behind them came the uneven thunder of a drunken man's boots and the slurred curses of Buck Harlan, words sharp enough to cut skin. "Lydia," he hollered, voice cracking. "You think you can steal from me? You think you can run off with what's mine?" She didn't dare look back. Her lungs burned, her legs trembled. Every instinct she had screamed that if she fell, if she slowed, Buck would be on them, on her, just like all the times before when nobody stepped in and nobody cared. Tommy tripped, nearly yanking her off balance. He cried out, voice thin with terror. She scooped him closer, whispering, "Just a little farther, sweetheart. I got you. I won't let him take you." But she didn't know if that was true. Lydia had lived her whole life making promises she couldn't keep. A bottle shattered near her feet, glass biting the dirt. She flinched hard. Buck laughed, the sound soaked in whiskey and cruelty. "Keep running, girl. Ain't nowhere you can hide." Her heart slammed so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. She could feel the edge of panic rising, the familiar, suffocating belief that no matter how hard she fought, no one ever came for her. Not when she was a child. Not when she lost everything. Not when she took in two orphans because no one else would bother. But then she saw it. A glow in the distance. Warm, steady, golden as salvation. Clay Ridge Ranch. A single lantern hung on the porch, swaying with the wind like someone had left it burning just for her. Lydia didn't think. She just ran, pushing her body past the pain, past the fear, past the quiet voice inside that whispered she didn't deserve rescue. Buck's footsteps grew louder. "Stop running, Lydia! You know how this ends!" She dragged the children across the last stretch of rough ground, staggered onto the porch, and pounded the door hard enough to bruise her knuckles. "Please," she gasped. "Please, somebody!" The door jerked open. A tall, broad-shouldered black rancher filled the frame, a shotgun in his hands, eyes sharp as cut obsidian. Jonas Clay didn't say a word at first, just took in the sight of Lydia shaking, the children clinging to her skirt, the terror written across all three of their faces. Behind her came Buck's voice again. "Jonas," he shouted from the darkness, "hand over that woman. She's got something belongs to me." Jonas didn't bother to lift the shotgun fully. He didn't need to. His stillness alone was enough to make the night pause. He looked at Lydia instead, looked at the dirt on her cheeks, the bruise blooming along her jaw, the way she shielded the children with her entire body. "You hurt?" Jonas asked quietly. Lydia could barely nod. "Please, just let the kids inside." Mira, trembling, reached out a tiny hand and pressed something into Jonas's palm, a silver earring Lydia hadn't even realized she'd dropped in the chaos. Jonas's jaw tightened at the touch of the metal. Something passed through his eyes, an old ache, a memory he didn't let surface. He lowered the shotgun. "Get in," he said. Lydia pushed Mira and Tommy through the doorway. Relief rushed through her so fast she nearly collapsed, but she turned back once more, desperate to see if Buck was still coming. He was, staggering closer, grinning like he'd already won. "Jonas Clay," he slurred, "you best not get in my way tonight." Jonas stepped onto the porch, blocking the door with his body. His voice dropped to a low, immovable rumble. "She's under my roof. She's under my protection. You want her, you go through me." Something in Lydia's chest cracked at those words. Nobody had ever stood between her and danger. Nobody had ever claimed her safety as their responsibility. Buck spat. "Ain't your business." "It is tonight." For a long moment the world held perfectly still. Lydia's breath hitched. Mira whimpered. Tommy buried his face in her waist. Then Buck cursed, stumbled backward, and finally turned into the darkness, shouting promises of what he'd do when he came back sober. When the echo of his threats finally faded, Lydia's knees buckled. Jonas caught her before she hit the floorboards. "Easy," he murmured. "You're safe now." Safe. She wanted to believe him so badly it hurt. She closed her eyes and let the truth of exhaustion take her, knowing only one thing as she slipped into darkness. For the first time in years, someone had opened a door for her, and for the first time ever, someone had stayed. Lydia didn't remember falling, only the sudden weightlessness, like her body finally quit fighting. And the next thing she knew, rough but careful hands were lowering her into a sturdy wooden chair. Her vision blurred. Her ears rang. She tried to speak, but all that came out was a broken whisper. Jonas Clay didn't push her. He didn't ask questions. He didn't grab her the way men usually did when a woman was in their house and too weak to stand. He simply crouched before her, steady and patient, letting her breathe. Mira held Tommy tight, the two children trembling like leaves in a hard wind. When Jonas glanced their way, his expression softened just enough to show he wasn't made of stone, just a man who'd learned to hide softness for survival. "You three been running long?" he asked quietly. Lydia forced herself upright, wincing as her ribs protested. "Long enough." Jonas didn't look at her bruises with pity. He looked at them like evidence, like something he'd seen too many times in too many towns. "Buck Harlan been drinking," he muttered. "I could smell the whiskey from your clothes." Lydia flinched, ashamed though she had no reason to be. He said the kids belonged to him." Jonas's jaw flexed. "And do they?" "No," she breathed. No, they don't belong to anybody. Not even me. I just kept them alive. The truth hung there, raw, fragile, almost painful. Mira tugged Lydia's sleeve and whispered, "We ain't going back, right?" Lydia swallowed hard. "Not if I can help it, baby." Jonas stood, slow and deliberate, as if making sure she wouldn't spook. She realized then that he watched her the same way he might approach a wounded mare, gentle, respectful, never demanding trust too fast. "I'll get some water," he said. "You all look half-dried." He stepped away toward the kitchen, boots whispering across the wooden floor. Lydia's breath trembled. The house felt quiet, quiet in a way she'd never known. No yelling, no slamming, no threats vibrating in the walls like trapped rage. For a woman who'd only known chaos, the silence felt almost dangerous. Jonas returned with a tin cup. Lydia tried to take it, but her hand shook so badly water sloshed onto the floor. Without a word, Jonas knelt again and held the cup to her lips, not touching her, not crowding her, just giving her a steady point in a world that wouldn't stop spinning. "Easy now," he murmured. The first sip hit her like warmth she didn't know how to hold. She drank too fast, coughing. Jonas set the cup down and pulled a folded blanket from the back of the sofa. Mira blinked when he wrapped it around her shoulders. "It's warm," she whispered, as if surprised warmth could exist. "It's yours tonight," Jonas said. Lydia watched him with a tight, aching confusion. Men didn't act like this. Not in her world. Kindness always came with strings, with prices, with hands grabbing, her hard enough to leave bruises. But Jonas only moved to stoke the stove fire. "You're safe here," he said again, voice quiet as low thunder. "Least for the night." Lydia's throat closed. She wanted to believe him, but didn't know how. Survival had taught her doubt faster than faith. Mira shuffled closer to Jonas, holding up a small silver earring, the one she'd given him on the porch. "You dropped this," she said shyly. Jonas froze just a heartbeat too long before taking it. His eyes flicked toward Lydia, something conflicted flickering there. An old memory. Maybe something worse. But he hid it as quickly as it showed. "Thank you, little one," he said. He slipped the earring into his pocket and stood. "You two kids hungry?" Tommy nodded fast, desperate and honest. Jonas pulled a loaf of bread from a cupboard, sliced it thick, and slid the plate across the table. Mira reached slowly, watching him as if waiting for him to snatch it away. Jonas didn't. He just nodded at the food like it wasn't a gift, just something human beings deserved. Lydia felt the smallest crack of warmth inside her chest. A dangerous warmth. Hope always was. She braced her palm on the table, trying to stand, but pain shot down her side so sharply she cried out without meaning to. Jonas moved fast, but not recklessly. Just a step toward her, hands raised, ready to catch her if she fell. "I'm fine," she rasped. "You ain't," he said softly. "You're hurt." "It doesn't matter." Jonas studied her a long moment. "Tonight it does." Lydia's breath quivered. Nobody had ever said that to her. Nobody had ever acted like her pain mattered. Jonas nodded toward the back room. There's a bed free. Clean sheets. You take it. I can't, Lydia protested too quickly. We can sleep on the floor, or the barn, or… Ma'am, Jonas said, voice gentle but immovable. I ain't askin'. He looked at her like she wasn't a burden, like she wasn't trouble or shame or damaged goods. He looked at her like she was a person worth carrying inside. Lydia felt her vision blur again, not from exhaustion this time, but from the shock of being treated like she mattered. Thank you, she whispered. Jonas stepped aside, giving her space to walk past him toward the room. She moved slowly, every bone aching, every instinct braced for something awful. But nothing awful came. She tucked the children into the bed first. They curled against each other, safe in a way they hadn't been in years. Then Lydia slid down beside them, blanket pulled over her shoulders, breath finally slowing. Outside, Jonas checked the locks, loaded the shotgun, and sat in a chair facing the door, silent sentinel against the night. Lydia watched him through the cracked doorway. She didn't trust him yet, but God help her. For the first time in a long, long while, she wanted to. Morning found Lydia slowly, like a hand gentle enough not to startle a skittish horse. She woke to warmth, real warmth, soft and steady, and for one blissful heartbeat she didn't remember the night before. Didn't remember the chase, the roaring fear, Buck's voice tearing through the dark. Then Tommy shifted beside her, Mira's small fingers curled in the fabric of her shirt, and everything returned. But something was different. There was no shouting, no bottle breaking, no footsteps pacing outside her door like a threat waiting to swing open. Instead, she heard a skillet, a wooden spoon tapping a bowl, a low rumble that might have been humming. She sat up too fast and winced as pain lanced through her ribs. Through the half-open door, she saw Jonas Clay moving around the kitchen in quiet, efficient motions. Broad shoulders, steady hands, sleeves rolled up to his forearms. He was stirring something on the stove while keeping one eye on the front windows, like he was guarding the house even while making breakfast. Lydia wasn't used to that kind of stillness in a man, or that kind of care. Mira woke next, blinking sleep from her eyes. Miss Lydia, are we safe? Lydia swallowed. For now, baby. Mira nodded, trusting her completely, more trust than Lydia thought she deserved. The little girl crawled off the bed and padded into the kitchen on bare feet. Jonas looked over, surprised but not unfriendly. Mornin', little miss. Mira stared at him, curious. You hum when you cook. Jonas cleared his throat, suddenly awkward. Didn't realize I did. It sounds nice, she said simply. He cracked the tiniest smile at that, quick and shy, like it wasn't something he let out often. Lydia felt something warm flicker low in her chest, unexpected and dangerous. She pushed it down fast. She rose carefully, gripping the doorframe when her knees trembled. Jonas noticed instantly. You ain't ready to be standing just yet, he said. I'm fine, she lied. Jonas set the wooden spoon down and approached, slow and measured, the way a man approaches a skittish mare who's been hit too many times. "You don't have to be fine," he said softly. "Not this minute." That simple sentence nearly undid her. Her throat tightened, breath hitching. Kindness always hurt more than cruelty, because kindness reminded her how long she'd lived without it. Tommy ran past her and into the kitchen. "Is there food? Real food?" Jonas chuckled low. "Ain't fancy, but it's hot." He set 3 bowls on the table. Stew thick with potatoes and beans, simple but hearty. Lydia stared for a moment, confused. "You cooked for us?" Jonas shrugged. "Cooked for the house. You're in it." Lydia sank into the nearest chair before her shaking legs gave out. Mira pointed at the folded cloth on the table. "That your scarf?" Jonas shook his head. "No, that one's for guests." "For guests?" Lydia asked, quietly. "Folks who need it," Jonas said. "Everybody's cold sometimes." The words hit her like a warm wind after a long winter. She didn't know why, but her vision blurred again. She blinked hard, wiping tears before they fell. Crying had always been dangerous, an invitation for someone to sneer or slap or call her weak. Jonas noticed. Of course he did. "Eat slow," he murmured. "You look like haven't had a proper meal in days." "We haven't," Tommy said bluntly, around a mouthful of stew. Lydia flushed with embarrassment. Jonas only nodded, as if that explained everything and blamed her for nothing. When the children settled into quiet eating, Lydia finally picked up her spoon. One taste and something inside her cracked open. Warmth spread through her chest like she hadn't swallowed food, but some small, stubborn piece of hope. Jonas stepped away, but kept his gaze on the windows, watching the road in case Buck rode back. "Why are you doing this?" Lydia asked, unable to stop the tremble in her voice. "Why help us?" Jonas didn't look at her when he answered. "'Cause I've seen folks run for their lives before," he said. "Seen what it looks like when nobody opens the door for 'em." He paused, jaw tightening. "Didn't figure I'd be that man again." Again. Lydia heard the weight in that word. The hurt. The history he didn't offer details for. Not yet. Maybe not ever. She wrapped her arms around herself. "I don't know why I'm crying," she choked. "'Cause you finally stopped running," Jonas said. Mira reached over and took Lydia's hand, like the girl had been reading her heart. "Miss Lydia," she whispered, "I think this place is good." Good. Lydia didn't remember what good felt like. But sitting there, in a warm kitchen, safe for one fragile morning, with a man who spoke gently and children who still believed in miracles. Maybe, just maybe she could learn. Jonas returned to the stove, voice quiet as he added, "Y'all can stay as long as you need. Ain't nobody getting through me today." Lydia looked at him, really looked. A man who kept his distance, kept his word, kept the fire burning so strangers could breathe again. She didn't trust him yet. But hope, Small, trembling, stubborn, found a place to stand. For 3 days, Clay Ridge Ranch settled around Lydia like a borrowed coat, warm but worn carefully, as if she feared it might be snatched away the moment she grew used to it. Jonas Clay didn't press her, didn't question her past, didn't look at her like she was trouble. He simply let the house breathe with 4 people in it instead of 1. On the morning of the 3rd day, Lydia stepped outside and found Mira feeding grain to the chickens with Jonas kneeling beside her, teaching her how to pour slow so the birds didn't startle. "See that?" Jonas said gently. "You gotta be patient. Chickens don't take kindly to quick moves." Mira giggled. "Like Miss Lydia?" Jonas huffed a laugh under his breath. "Something like that." Lydia froze in the doorway, unsure whether to smile or hide. She wasn't used to being teased lightly. Teasing in her old life always led to something cruel. But Jonas's voice held nothing sharp, just quiet amusement. Tommy, meanwhile, sat on a stool beside one of the horses, running a brush down its side. The horse was bigger than any child should stand beside, yet Tommy's hands were steady. Jonas rose when he noticed Lydia dusting his palms on his jeans. "Mornin'. Kids took to the chores faster than some grown men I know." Tommy puffed up proudly. "I'm helping Clay Ridge." Lydia stepped down the porch stairs slowly. "You don't have to work," she said softly. "You both deserve rest." Jonas shook his head. "Work don't hurt children. Fear does." The words landed heavy, true in a way Lydia wished she didn't understand. She watched Tommy stroke the horse with gentle, practiced motions. "You teaching him right?" Jonas's mouth quirked. "He's teaching me right now. Boy's patient with the animals. They trust him quick." Lydia's shoulders eased, tension slipping just a little. She had lived so long telling the children what to fear and how to run that she'd forgotten what it looked like when someone taught them how to stay. She joined Mira near the chicken coop, awkwardly reaching for the grain bucket. Jonas stepped behind her, not close enough to touch, just near enough to guide her hands. "Don't tip too much at once," he said. "They crowd too hard." His voice was warm at her ear, steady as a heartbeat. Lydia swallowed hard, surprised at how much she wanted to lean into that steadiness. But old instincts rose fast. She stiffened and moved away just an inch. "Sorry," she whispered. Jonas paused. "You ain't done nothing wrong." Lydia looked down, embarrassed by how quickly fear swept her off balance. "I'm not good at being near people." "Most folks ain't," Jonas said gently. "Just some hide it better." The weight in his tone made her look up. For a moment she saw something in his eyes. Loneliness, deep and quiet, worn like a second skin. It struck her with a sudden ache. He wasn't just offering shelter, he needed company as much as they did. Mira tugged Jonas's sleeve. "Can we call you Pa just for today?" Lydia's breath caught. "Mira, don't." Jonas froze, expression flickering with something raw and painful and tender all at once. He knelt slowly so he was eye level with the girl. "Tell you what," he said, voice steady though his hands trembled slightly. "You can call me Jonas, but if you ever need someone to show up for you, I'll do my damned best." Mira nodded solemnly, satisfied. Lydia's chest tightened painfully. She couldn't remember the last time someone offered anything without wanting something in return. Later, as Lydia tried to help Jonas mend a fence, she fumbled the hammer twice. The third time, Jonas caught her wrist mid-swing, not tight, just firm enough to stop her from smashing her thumb. "You're holding it like it's gonna bite you," he murmured. "It might," she muttered, flushing. Jonas shook his head. "Ain't the hammer you're scared of." He didn't say more, didn't force the conversation, merely guided her fingers into a better grip and stepped back. Lydia stared at her hand long after he'd moved away. 3 days. 3 quiet, soft-edged days. It felt like she was living inside someone else's life, someone who deserved gentleness. As the sun dipped low, she stood on the porch watching Mira and Tommy chase each other through a patch of dusty grass. Jonas leaned against the porch post beside her, arms folded loosely. "Kids laugh easy," he said. "They didn't used to," she whispered. "They will here." The certainty in his voice made her chest ache again, in that dangerous, unfamiliar way she didn't know how to name. "Jonas," she said quietly, it feels like a dream. And dreams don't last for people like Mitty." He turned toward her, dark eyes steady. "Maybe you ain't had the right kind of dream yet." She didn't answer. She couldn't. The warmth of the past 3 days had wrapped around her so tightly, she almost believed she could stay. But good things never stayed with her, and somewhere out beyond the ridge, trouble was riding their way. Jonas seemed to sense it too. His eyes shifted toward the road, jaw tightening. For the first time since she'd arrived, Lydia wasn't running. But she felt the storm coming all the same. By the 4th morning, the peace at Clay Ridge felt almost real, too real. Lydia sensed it slipping long before the trouble appeared on the horizon. Jonas sensed it too. He stood on the porch before sunrise, arms crossed, gaze fixed on the empty stretch of dirt road leading toward dry mesa. The air felt strange, tight, heavy like the world was holding its breath. Lydia stepped beside him slowly. "You think he'll come back?" Jonas nodded once. "A man like Buck Harlan don't give up till somebody makes him." Before she could respond, the distant thud of hooves rolled across the flat land. Mira ran out with Tommy. "Riders," she whispered, clinging to Lydia's skirt. Jonas didn't move at first. His jaw tightened, shoulders squared, and something old, something carved from years of being tested, settled into his stance. 3 riders approached Clay Ridge: Sheriff Lowell, Buck Harlan, and Judge Trugo. The trio no one in the territory wanted to see together. Lydia's stomach dropped. "Oh God, no." Jonas stepped down the porch stairs, not rushing, not shaking, just ready. "Kids, get behind me." Mira grabbed Tommy's hand and did as told. Buck Harlan's smirk showed the moment his horse stopped. "Well now," he drawled, "ain't this a pretty picture?" Sheriff Lowell looked Lydia over with a cold, measured gaze, as if she were livestock to be inspected. Judge Trugo didn't dismount. "We're here on legal matters," he said sharply. "That woman is accused of kidnapping 2 minors and fleeing town. We're here to collect her." Lydia's breath caught. "Kidnapping? Those children were left alone." Harlan cut her off with a mocking laugh. "Left with you, darlin', which ain't the same as being safe." Jonas's voice rumbled low. "Get off my property." Trugo ignored him. "Hand her over, Mr. Clay. Arizona territory law does not grant guardianship to—" He paused, a faint sneer curling his lip. "Your kind." Jonas didn't flinch, though Lydia saw something sharp flash across his expression. A wound he'd learned to hide. Harlan swung a leg over his saddle and jumped down, swaggering toward Lydia. "Come now, sweetheart. Stop running around pretending you're some kind of mother." Lydia stepped back instinctively, bumping into Jonas's shoulder. He stood firm, blocking her with his entire frame. "She ain't going nowhere," Jonas said. Sheriff Lowell dismounted at that, hand resting on the butt of his revolver. "Careful, Clay. Harboring a wanted fugitive." "She ain't wanted," Jonas snapped. "You're just doing Harlan's dirty work." Lowell's eyes narrowed. "You saying I'm corrupt?" Jonas's stare was dead steady. "I'm saying you showed up on my land without a warrant." Trugo waved his hand dismissively. "Clay Ridge is hardly civilized property." Tommy whimpered behind Lydia. She wrapped an arm around him, heart pounding so loud she thought everyone could hear it. Harlan leaned sideways, trying to peek at the boy. "Tommy boy, don't you want to come back home?" "There ain't no home with you," Tommy whispered, terrified. Harlan's expression curdled. "You little—" Jonas stepped forward, cutting him off with pure force of presence. "You raise a hand here," he said, voice quiet as a storm about to break, "and you'll lose it." Even Sheriff Lowell shifted uncomfortably. Trugo cleared his throat. "Mr. Clay, you are obstructing legal custody." Jonas didn't move. "And you're standing on my land without a scrap of paper saying you can take her." Silence stretched. Wind scraped dust across their boots. Finally, Lowell spoke, lips thin. "This ain't over." Harlan spat in the dirt, rage twisting his face. "You're making a mistake, Clay." Jonas didn't blink. "I'll make it again if I have to." Sheriff Lowell mounted his horse. "We'll be back with signatures, and guns if needed." The 3 men turned, riding off in a cloud of dust that tasted like threat and certainty. When they were out of sight, Lydia's knees buckled. Jonas grabbed her elbow, steadying her. "You all right?" he asked. "No," she whispered honestly. "They won't stop." "No," Jonas agreed. His voice was calm, but the calm that comes before lightning. "But neither will I." Lydia swallowed, staring at him, chest tight. "Jonas, you could have let them take me. It would have kept you out of trouble." Fear flickered in Jonas's eyes. Not fear of men or guns, but of something deeper. Losing what little he'd let himself care about. "I ain't letting anyone hurt you or those kids," he said. "Not while there's breath in me." Something inside Lydia cracked open again. Warm and painful, fragile and real. Mira slipped her small hand into Jonas's. "You're our good guy," she whispered. Jonas froze at that, not smiling, not embarrassed, just stunned, like the words dug into places he'd buried long ago. Lydia felt her heart twist. 3 days of peace were over. Dry Mesa was coming for them. And the only thing standing between their lives and ruin was one quiet rancher with too many scars and a heart he didn't know how to stop using. Night at Clay Ridge usually settled soft, like the land was tucking itself in. But not tonight. Lydia felt the wrongness before she heard it. A sharp scent, burning hay, burning wood, slipped through the cracks of the window and dragged her from sleep. She bolted upright. Jonas. But Jonas was already moving. He burst through the bedroom door, shotgun in hand, eyes blazing with the kind of fear men only feel when they've already lost too much in their lives. "Take the kids," he ordered. "Get 'em outside, now." Mira started crying the moment Lydia scooped her up. Tommy clung to her waist. Outside the window, orange light flickered against the dark sky, growing fast, too fast. Jonas threw the front door open, and the truth hit them all at once. The barn was on fire. Not a small blaze. An inferno swallowing the roof, roaring like a wild animal. Sparks flew into the air, landing across dry grass in hungry little bites. Lydia's breath shattered. "Jonas, oh God." He didn't wait. He ran full speed toward the stall doors. "Jonas, no!" Lydia screamed, voice cracking. "You'll be killed!" He didn't stop, didn't look back. He simply bellowed at the terrified horses and dove inside. The heat punched Lydia in the face as she chased him halfway across the yard, children clinging to her skirts. The roof groaned, wood popping like gunfire. Inside, Jonas cut lead ropes, kicking open gates, shouting commands through smoke thick enough to choke on. "Move! Go! Get out!" 2 horses bolted out, followed by a third. Another screamed, high, panicked. Jonas vanished deeper into the blaze. "Please," Lydia begged no one, holding Tommy and Mira tight. "Please come back out." A beam cracked overhead and fell, exploding into a cloud of fire. Lydia staggered back, shielding the children. Then she saw Mira's face twist in sudden horror. "Tommy!" Mira cried. "Where's Tommy?" Lydia whipped around. He wasn't by her legs, wasn't behind her, wasn't anywhere, until she spotted him. The little boy was crouched near the burning corral fence, frozen in fear, inches from where sparks were falling like burning rain. "No, Tommy, no!" Lydia sprinted toward him without thinking, lungs filling with smoke, vision blurring. She grabbed him under the arms, just as a flaming shard dropped where he'd been standing. He clung to her chest, sobbing. I couldn't find you." "It's okay. It's okay, sweetheart. I got you. Don't look at the fire." A fierce gust of wind fanned the flames higher, sending embers swirling around them like fireflies turned violent. Lydia turned, coughing hard, and something metallic glinted in the dirt. She recognized it instantly. Sheriff Lowell's badge. Her stomach dropped cold. No, this couldn't mean... but the truth slammed into her anyway. Twist 1. The sheriff had been here. The sheriff had done this. "Lydia!" Jonas roared from inside the barn. She spun just in time to see him lunge through the doorway, half carrying, half shoving the last horse out. His sleeve was smoking, flames licking up toward his shoulder. He ripped the shirt off with one brutal yank and smothered the fire against the ground. Then the barn roof caved in behind him. Lydia screamed. But Jonas was still moving, barely, stumbling toward them, with smoke-blackened skin and wild eyes. Mira ran first, sobbing. Lydia followed with Tommy. Jonas dropped to one knee, reaching blindly for them, body shaking like it didn't know whether to collapse or keep fighting. "You're all right," Lydia choked, gripping his shoulders. "You're all right. Jonas, look at me." He lifted his head, eyes rimmed red from smoke, but focused wholly, fiercely on her. "I told you," he rasped. "Nobody gets hurt under my roof." She broke then, just a little, because the way he said it wasn't bravado. It was a vow. Screams echoed from the collapsing barn, wood crashing and sparks flying like angry stars. The horses that made it out stomped and circled, panicked. Jonas forced himself upright, swaying. "Get the kids inside. There might be more coming. Folks who start fires don't stop at that." Lydia grabbed his arm. "Jonas, Sheriff Lowell's badge was out here." Jonas froze. "What?" She pointed to the dirt. Jonas stared at the badge like it was a snake ready to strike. His breathing changed, slower, darker, heavier. "They burned my land," he said quietly. "And they ain't done." Fear coiled tight in Lydia's gut. "They want me. They want the children. And they'll go through me to get to you," Jonas said, voice a low, deadly promise. "Let 'em try." The last of the barn collapsed in a booming roar, showering sparks across the night sky. The world smelled like smoke and betrayal. Lydia held the children close. Jonas stood at her side, chest heaving, bare skin streaked with soot. He looked like a man with nothing left to lose, and everything suddenly worth fighting for. The fire had not just destroyed the barn. It had burned away the illusion that the law was on their side. And as the ashes settled over Clay Ridge, Lydia realized something terrifying. This wasn't a warning. It was the beginning. Smoke still hung in the early light like a ghost that refused to leave. Clay Ridge Ranch sat quiet, too quiet. Nothing but the crackle of dying embers where the barn had once stood. Lydia barely slept. Jonas didn't sleep at all. By dawn, he stood alone at the edge of the ashes, shirtless still, skin streaked with soot, eyes hollow, like he was staring at the ruins of more than just a building. Lydia approached carefully, Mira and Tommy watching from the porch with wide, shaken eyes. "You should rest," she whispered. Jonas didn't turn. "I will, after I figure out how the sheriff's badge got here." "You know how," Lydia said softly. "You just don't want to say it." He closed his eyes, jaw tightening. Lydia took a shaky breath. "Jonas, why would Sheriff Lowell want to burn down your barn?" Why now? Why go this far just to take us? Jonas finally looked at her, and the pain in his eyes was deeper than anything flames had done to him. You deserve the truth, he said. Her stomach twisted. She felt it coming, the way a storm announces itself in the bones. Jonas reached into his pocket and pulled out the silver earring Mia had handed him, the one she found when Lydia collapsed at his door. He held it as if deciding whether he had the right to speak. Lydia, he began slowly. I knew I'd seen this before. Lydia frowned. Before? He nodded, swallowing hard. 7 years ago. Her breath hitched. That's when my father died. Jonas's face crumpled, raw guilt flashing like lightning. Lydia's pulse pounded in her temples. He took a shaky step toward her. Your earrings. They're crescent agave pieces. Rare. Handmade. Only one woman in the border towns wore a pair like that. My mother, Lydia whispered. Jonas lowered his head. I didn't know she had a daughter. I didn't know her name. But I remember her face. Lydia stumbled back as if he'd struck her. No, this couldn't be. Jonas, she whispered, voice trembling violently. What are you saying? Jonas's chest rose and fell hard. He raked a hand through his hair, fighting himself, then finally spoke. I was there, he said, the night she died. Lydia's world tilted. What? He didn't flinch, didn't soften it. He said it like a man refusing to lie anymore, even to save himself. I wasn't the one who shot her, Jonas said, voice breaking. But I was part of the border patrol hired by Judge Trugo. We rode out to settle a land dispute. That's what they told us. But when we got there, he swallowed, voice hoarse. Your mama was kneeling in the mud, holding that earring. She begged us not to take your father. Lydia's chest constricted so sharply she couldn't breathe. Trugo wanted the land, Jonas continued. Your father wouldn't sign. Sheriff Lowell was just a deputy then. He pushed your mama aside, called her trouble, said she was resistant. Lydia shook her head violently. Stop! Stop, Jonas, don't! Jonas stepped toward her, anguished. Lydia, I didn't know they were going to hurt her. I didn't know your father was innocent. When Lowell hit her, I told my men to stand down. I tried. God help me, I tried. But he shut his eyes. She fell. Lowell lifted his rifle. Trugo gave the order. Silence fell so heavy Lydia thought the earth itself might split. Then Jonas said the words that shattered her. I didn't pull the trigger, but I didn't stop them either. Lydia's knees buckled. Jonas reached out instinctively, but she jerked away like his touch burned her. You were there, she whispered, hollow, broken. All this time, you knew what they did to my parents. I didn't know it was your family, Jonas said desperately. Not until I saw that earring. Not until Buck said you had land. Not until... Lydia stepped back again. And you didn't tell me. Jonas's face twisted with guilt. I was scared. Scared you'd leave. Scared you'd hate me before I could make it right. You should have let me leave, she choked. He shook his head. I couldn't. Her tears finally spilled, hot and furious. How am I supposed to look at you? How am I supposed to trust you when you stood there while they murdered my family? Jonas didn't defend himself, didn't step toward her. He stood perfectly still, like a man waiting for judgment. You ain't supposed to forgive me, he whispered. I don't deserve that. But I swear on everything I got left, I'll spend the rest of my life fighting those men for what they did. For you, your family. Lydia backed away, shaking. The tears, the anger, the heartbreak. It all swirled until she couldn't tell where one ended and another began. Don't you say this is for me, she whispered. You did this because you couldn't live with yourself. Not for me. Jonas didn't argue. He just stood there in the ash and smoke, alone, broken, and stripped of every secret he'd buried. Behind her, Mira and Tommy watched silently from the porch, sensing the fracture without understanding it. Lydia wiped her eyes with trembling fingers. I don't know if I can stay here anymore, she whispered. Jonas's voice cracked as he answered. I know. A single ember drifted from the ruin of the barn and landed between them, still glowing, still dangerous. Just like the truth Jonas had finally let burn. And for the first time since she'd arrived at Clay Ridge, Lydia didn't feel safe. She felt lost, betrayed, alone again. Only worse because for a few fragile days, she'd tasted what it felt like not to be. Lydia didn't leave Clay Ridge that morning. Not because she wanted to stay, but because revenge finally weighed heavier than fear. By noon, the sky hung white and hot, stretching over the dusty miles between Clay Ridge and Dry Mesa. Lydia saddled one of the surviving horses with stiff, trembling hands. Mira and Tommy stood beside her, clinging to her skirt. Miss Lydia, you're not going alone? Mira whispered. Lydia forced herself to kneel so she could look the girl in the eye. I've been running my whole life, baby. I'm done now. What happened to us? What happened to my family? Can't stay buried. Tommy wiped his nose. Are they going to take us? Not if I breathe, Lydia said fiercely. Not ever again. Behind them came slow footsteps on the dry earth. Jonas. His presence still broke something inside her, but no longer the same way. It wasn't the warm ache of safety. It was a jagged, bitter pain, like a wound that wanted to heal but couldn't yet. Lydia, Jonas said, voice low. You don't have to go into that town alone. She refused to look at him. You don't get to protect me from the men you once rode with. A muscle jumped in Jonas's jaw, but he didn't argue. They'll try to break you. They already did, she said, climbing onto the saddle with new, burning purpose. This time I break them back. Jonas stepped closer. If you go in there without backup, then come, she snapped. But don't you say one word unless it's the truth. Jonas swallowed. Shame, fear, something deeper, and nodded. The ride to Dry Mesa felt long but strangely steady. Lydia's heart pounded with each hoofbeat, yet her mind was clearer than it had been in years. Jonas rode beside her, Mira and Tommy sharing the saddle in front of Lydia, hanging on tight. By the time the four of them entered Dry Mesa's main street, the town turned to look. Whispers rose, faces hardened. Judge Trugo stepped out from his office porch with an oily smile. Sheriff Lowell followed, hand resting on his holster. Buck Harlan pushed past a line of townsfolk, face red with triumph. "Well, look here," Buck crowed. "The runaway hen brought herself home." Lydia dismounted, shaking with fury, but standing tall. "Enough, Buck. You want the truth? I'll give it to everybody." Trugo laughed. "Truth? You've caused nothing but trouble. You murdered my parents." The words cut the street clean in half. Air stopped moving. Lydia's voice rose, strong despite the tremble. 7 years ago, you rode out to our land, claimed a dispute, and executed my mother and father to steal their property." The crowd stiffened. Someone muttered, "Lord help us." Another whispered, "Is that true?" Trugo straightened, face twisting. "You have no proof." "I do," Lydia said, and she turned to Jonas. Jonas stepped forward like a man walking into fire. "I was there," he said, voice quiet but booming across the silent street. "I didn't fire the gun, but I didn't stop them either." A gasp ran through the crowd. Sheriff Lowell's eyes narrowed. "You lying, Clay. Trying to save this woman with some tale?" But before he could finish, an old man pushed through the crowd, thin, hunched, but walking with sharp purpose. His hat shook in his trembling hand. "I got proof," he said, voice cracking with age. "Found it the night the Rowans died." He held out something small, shining, familiar. The matching silver earring, the other half of the crescent agave set. Lydia's breath caught. The old man turned to the crowd. "I kept it because I knew the law wouldn't listen. Wasn't safe to speak then. Might not be safe now. But I ain't taken this secret to my grave." Judge Trugo paled. "This is nonsense." "No," the old man rasped, pointing a shaking finger. "It's the truth. The sheriff and Trugo were there. Lowell threatened the whole county quiet. And Clay wasn't an angel, but he tried to pull your arm down, Lowell. I saw it." The crowd erupted, fear, anger, betrayal boiling at once. Buck Harlan snarled, reaching for Tommy. "Enough of this! Hand that boy over!" Lydia shoved Mira behind her and stepped in front of Tommy. "Don't you touch him!" But Buck lunged anyway. Before he reached them, Jonas grabbed Buck's collar and slammed him backward, rage blazing through him. "Touch them and see what happens," Jonas growled. Townspeople began shouting accusations, some at Trugo, some at Lowell, some at Jonas, some at Lydia. The square turned into a storm. Lydia raised her voice above it all. "I'm not running anymore," she yelled. "Not from truth, not from men with badges who don't deserve them. You want justice? Look at who's been hurting this town for years." Her voice cracked, raw and ringing. For the first time in her life, Lydia Rowan wasn't the hunted. She was the one standing in the middle of a town and demanding they wake up. And Dry Mesa was finally listening. Chaos rolled across Dry Mesa like a sudden sandstorm. Shouts, boots scraping, fear spinning through the crowd. Lydia tightened her hold on Mira, pushing the girl behind her skirt while Tommy clung to her other side. Jonas stood like a wall between them and danger, chest rising steady despite the storm brewing around him. But Buck Harlan was faster than either of them expected. One heartbeat. Jonas was watching the sheriff and Trugo argue with the crowd. The next, Buck shoved two townsmen aside, lunged forward, and snatched Tommy by the back of his shirt. The boy's scream tore the air open. "Tommy!" Lydia cried, reaching too late. Buck yanked the child tight against his chest, pressing the cold muzzle of a revolver to Tommy's temple. The crowd fell silent instantly, horror freezing every breath. Tommy shook violently, small fingers clawing the air for Lydia. "Miss Lydia, help!" Lydia's heart splintered. "Let him go, Buck. Let him go now." Buck grinned, wild and ugly. Sweat dripped from his temples, mixing with the dust of Dry Mesa. "Y'all don't listen worth a damn. I told you this boy's mine." "No," Lydia whispered, voice trembling with fury and terror. "He's not." Jonas took a step forward, jaw tight, eyes deadly. "Put the gun down, Harlan." Buck jerked Tommy harder, making the boy cry out. "You take one more step, Clay. I'll decorate this dirt with his brains." Jonas froze instantly. Lydia saw it, the shift in his eyes, the way he recoiled, not from the threat, but from something rising like a ghost behind his ribs. His breath hitched, sharp, broken, a flashback, a memory. The night Lydia's parents died. The gun, the helplessness. Lydia recognized the haunted look. It twisted her stomach with something deeper than anger. Fear for him, too. Buck waved his pistol wildly, breathing hard. "This whole town's been lying about me. About my rights. This boy's blood, his blood, is mine." And then he said it. The truth Lydia had dreaded without knowing. "Tommy's my son," Buck snarled. "Born from a whore who died before she told a soul. That boy's got my blood, and blood don't lie." A ripple of shock tore through the crowd. Lydia felt the world tilt. Tommy went rigid. Jonas's fists clenched, knuckles white as bone. But Lydia did not flinch. Her voice came out steady, fiercer, and clearer than fire. "Blood doesn't make a family. Choice does, and you never chose him, not once." Buck spat. "I don't need to choose nothin'. He's mine by nature." "No," Lydia snarled, stepping forward despite the gun. "He's a child, not property, and you never loved him." Tommy sobbed. "Miss Lydia, don't let him take me." Lydia's heart shattered, but her spine straightened with iron. "He's not taking you, baby. He's not taking any of us." Buck pressed the gun harder into the boy's head. Tommy whimpered. Jonas trembled. "Lydia," he whispered, voice raw. "If I rush him, Tommy might—" Lydia shook her head sharply. "Not him. Buck wants control, not a corpse. He needs the boy alive to claim anything." Buck's eyes widened, anger sparking bright. "You shut your—" But Lydia had stepped fully into the fire now. "You're not here for Tommy, Buck. You're here because you don't control us anymore. Buck's face twisted, almost animalistic. You think you're something now? You think this town'll believe a woman like you? They already do, she shot back. Several townsfolk murmured agreement. Buck howled, furious, and jerked Tommy closer. You ain't taking what's mine. Jonas suddenly inhaled sharply, like someone had struck him in the chest. Then his breath steadied. The flashback passed. His fear did not vanish, but he mastered it. Something Lydia had not seen him do before. He took one step forward. Buck, Jonas said softly, but with a force that cut clean through the street. You think blood gives you the right to hurt a child? Buck hesitated. The crowd leaned in. Jonas stepped closer, voice rising, not loud, but iron true. Blood ain't what raises a kid. Blood ain't what protects 'em. Blood ain't what gets up at dawn or stays up at night or gives 'em something to believe in. Buck's grip faltered for the briefest moment. Jonas's voice grew stronger. You ain't never been a father to anyone. That boy owes you nothing. Tommy's tear-stained face turned toward Jonas, hope flickering. Lydia saw it. How Jonas's words weren't just for Buck. They were for himself. For the mistakes he could never undo. For the guilt he carried like chains. Then Jonas finished, stepping directly into Buck's aim. Because family is who stands up for you, not who hurts you. The street held its breath. Buck roared with frustration, caught between rage, pride, and the sudden realization the town wasn't with him anymore. Shut up, Clay! I'll kill the kid! Jonas didn't flinch. Then you'll have to shoot through me. Buck's hand shook visibly now. Sweat poured down his face. The crowd pressed in. Sheriff Lowell looked uncertain, edgy, dangerous. Tommy cried harder, reaching toward Jonas with one trembling hand. Please. Lydia felt her heart break open entirely. This moment, this impossible, unbearable moment, was the edge everything had been dragging them toward. And somewhere deep in her chest, something old and furious and alive snapped free. Her voice came out a low, trembling battle cry. No more. The town shifted. Buck's grip faltered. The next second would change everything. Dry Mesa stood on the brink, and so did Lydia, Jonas, Tommy, all of them. The storm had broken, and the real fight was about to begin. The moment stretched thin as a rattlesnake's tongue. One tremble, one breath, one wrong twitch of Buck's finger, and Tommy's life would spill into the dust. Lydia felt her pulse hammer in her skull. Her breath came ragged, cold, sharp enough to cut her from the inside. Every instinct screamed to lunge, to fight, to claw the gun out of Buck's hand. But Jonas stepped forward instead, slow, deliberate, unafraid. He placed himself fully between Lydia and the barrel pointed at Tommy. Move and he dies! Buck shrieked. Jonas didn't blink, didn't breathe wrong, didn't bow. Instead, he spoke in a voice low enough to settle a stampede. Buck, you don't know what being a father means. Buck's hand jerked. Shut up. Jonas kept going. You think blood makes you a man. But it don't. Blood don't feed a kid. Blood don't teach him right from wrong. Blood don't keep nightmares away. His voice rose, not shouting, but booming with truth that hit the crowd hard. Then he said the words that would become legend in Dry Mesa. Blood can't make a family. Choice does. A gasp rippled across the street. Even Tommy stopped crying long enough to look at Jonas with something like awe. Buck's face contorted, fury twisting his mouth. You think you're better than me? You ain't nothing but a... Enough! A woman's voice cut through the air. Heads turned. Mrs. Keating, small, old, quiet, stepped forward, chin trembling but determined. That man, she said, pointing at Buck, beat my sister so bad she couldn't stand for a week. Another woman came forward. He broke my boy's arm when he wouldn't clean his boots fast enough. A third pushed through, voice shaking. He hit me in front of the church. The crowd erupted, not with chaos this time, but with memory. Wounds, whispered stories finally breaking loose. Buck's eyes widened. Shut up, all of you. But they didn't. They finally spoke. You hurt us. You scared us. You controlled us. No more. Sheriff Lowell shifted uneasily. Judge Trugo hissed at him under his breath. Do something! But for the first time, Lowell didn't obey. Something in him cracked. Something small but human. He looked at the terrified child in Buck's grip, at Lydia's trembling rage, at the town he'd sworn to protect and instead helped destroy. And very slowly, Lowell drew his gun. Buck, he said, voice rough, let the boy go. Buck's hand shook worse now. Lowell, what the hell? This ends today, the sheriff said. Drop the damn gun. The crowd fell silent again, stunned. Sheriff Lowell, corrupt, complicit, cruel, was pointing his weapon not at Jonas, not at Lydia, but at Buck Harlan. No, Buck rasped. You can't let the boy go. Buck snarled like an animal. Rage twisted every muscle in his face. He jerked Tommy closer, and Lowell fired. A clean, merciful shot. The bullet tore into Buck's hand. His gun flew one way, his scream the other. Tommy stumbled free. Jonas dove forward and caught the boy before he hit the ground. Buck fell to his knees, clutching his bleeding wrist. You bastard! Lowell, you traitor! Lowell stepped closer, gun steady. Should have done this a long time ago. Tommy sobbed in Jonas's arms, clutching his shirt like a lifeline. Jonas held the boy tight, shielding him with his whole body. Lydia rushed to them, tears spilling freely. When Tommy reached for her, she pulled him into her embrace, heart pounding with relief so fierce it hurt. Trugo tried to slip away unnoticed. The old man who'd brought the earring shouted, "Stop him!" Two ranch hands blocked the judge's path. Murmurs rose into outrage. Jonas finally stood, chest heaving. He looked at Lydia with something raw, an apology, a plea, a lifetime of regret carved into a single glance. But this moment belonged to Tommy. Jonas, Tommy whispered, you came for me. Jonas's voice cracked. Always. Buck Harlan was seized and dragged to the jailhouse, screaming curses that no one listened to anymore. Judge Trugo was surrounded by half the town, forced to answer for every buried sin. Sheriff Lowell lowered his gun slowly, as if finally feeling the weight of all his choices. And Lydia stood in the center of the chaos, holding Tommy, Mira clutching her side, breathing for the first time like the world might not collapse under her anymore. Jonas stepped toward her. Not close, just enough for her to hear him. "You okay?" he asked softly. She met his gaze, eyes shining. Pain, relief, anger, love, confusion all tangled together. "I don't know," she whispered honestly. "But the kids are safe." Jonas nodded, voice barely a breath. "That's all that matters." Lydia looked at him, really looked, and something deep inside her shifted again. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But the beginning of something that could become it. Around them, dry mesa roared with consequence. But inside Lydia's chest, a tiny trembling flame rebuilt itself. A future, a choice, a chance. And for the first time, it didn't feel impossible. Evening crawled across Clay Ridge as slowly as grief. The crowds in Dry Mesa had scattered, the shouting had faded, and the world had gone strangely, painfully quiet. Lydia rode back toward the ranch with Jonas at her side. Not together, not apart. Just two wounded souls traveling the same road because there was nowhere else to go. The children slept, slumped against each other on the horse, drained from terror and tears. Their small hands were still locked together. Lydia kept glancing back at them, as if afraid they might vanish if she looked away too long. Jonas rode silently, shoulders sagging with exhaustion, soot still staining his skin. He had saved Tommy. He had stood between them and death. He had faced his past. But none of that erased what came before. Not yet. The ruins of the barn loomed like a grave in the fading light. Black beams jutted upward like bones, still smoldering. Lydia slid off the horse first and gently lifted Mira into her arms. Tommy stirred and reached for Jonas, who gathered the boy with surprising tenderness. They carried the children into the house and tucked them onto the couch, where both fell asleep instantly. When Lydia stepped back outside, Jonas was already waiting near the ashes. His silhouette looked carved out of loneliness. He didn't turn when she approached, didn't speak. He only stared into the rubble, hands hanging loosely at his sides, as if he didn't know what to do with them anymore. Lydia's voice came out soft but steady. "Jonas, why did you come back here alone?" He exhaled, long and slow. "Had to see it." "See what?" "What my choices cost." Lydia's throat tightened. "Your choices saved us today." Jonas shook his head. After destroying enough to fill a lifetime, he finally faced her, and the rawness in his eyes nearly knocked her breath out. "I don't expect you to forgive me," he said quietly. "Hell, I don't even want you to. Forgiveness ain't something a man like me gets to ask for." His voice cracked like something inside him had split open. "But I need you to know, I ain't running from it anymore. All these years, I carried that night like a shadow. I kept telling myself I wasn't the one who pulled the trigger, that I didn't mean for it to happen. He swallowed hard. But not stopping a wrong is still a wrong. And I stood there, Lydia. I let it happen. Lydia wrapped her arms around herself, the cool night wind brushing against her bruised skin. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Jonas lowered his head. Because the moment I saw you standing on my porch with those kids, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Hope. And I was scared telling the truth would make you run. It almost did, she whispered. He nodded. I know. They stood in silence, the burned barn crackling behind them. The smell of smoke clung to everything. Clothes, hair, memories. Jonas reached into his pocket. I found this when the barn fell. He opened his palm. Both pieces of the silver earring, hers and the one the old man had saved, rested together, forming the full crescent agave shape for the first time since her mother's death. Lydia's breath hitched. She reached out slowly, but didn't take them. Why give them to me? Because they're yours, he said. Because the truth is yours. And because if you decide to leave this place tomorrow, I ain't gonna hold you back. Lydia blinked hard, tears burning her eyes. You'd let me walk away? I'd let you walk, Jonas said gently. But I'd never stop looking out for you from whatever distance you chose. Her chest ached, not with anger this time, but with something softer, painful, uncertain, but soft. She stepped closer. Jonas, I'm still hurt, she whispered. You should be, he said. I don't know if I can forgive you. I ain't asking for forgiveness. What are you asking for? He lifted his eyes to hers, voice trembling. A chance to stand beside you while you decide. Those words slipped into her like warmth through frost. Slow, hesitant, real. Lydia inhaled shakily. I don't know what tomorrow will look like. Jonas nodded. Then we take tonight, one breath at a time. She hesitated, then reached out and took his hand, gently, carefully, like someone picking up a broken thing with every intention of not dropping it again. I'm not ready to forgive, she said, but I'm ready to not hate you. Jonas's breath left him in a shudder. His fingers curled around hers, slow and reverent, as if he couldn't believe she allowed the touch. That's more'n I deserve, he whispered. They stood like that, hand in hand, in the ruins of what had been destroyed and the beginning of what still might be rebuilt. Mira stirred inside the house. Tommy mumbled in his sleep. Lydia squeezed Jonas's hand one last time before stepping back. You should rest, she murmured. I will, Jonas said, voice softening. Right after I make sure this place stays safe tonight. Lydia nodded, the smallest hint of something gentle tugging at her heart. Maybe trust wouldn't come quickly. Maybe healing wouldn't come cleanly. But the first stitch had been made, and it was enough. For now. Morning light spilled across Clay Ridge like a quiet blessing. For the first time in months, The ranch wasn't filled with fear or smoke or shouts. It was filled with people. Folks from Dry Mesa rode in carrying lumber, ropes, nails, sacks of feed. No one asked for payment. No one asked for anything. They just showed up. Jonas stood among them, stunned in a way he didn't quite know how to hide. Lydia watched from the porch, Mira perched on the railing, Tommy clinging to her skirt. The sight was almost too much, too warm, too gentle, too far from everything they had survived. A blacksmith hammered new hinges. Ranch hands rebuilt stalls. Two older women scrubbed soot from the remaining beams while gossiping loudly about Buck Harlan's upcoming trial. And in the center of the yard, Jonas carved. Two tall wooden posts, one shaped like a crescent moon, the other inlaid with carved agave leaves. The symbol formed perfectly when placed side by side, like two halves finally meeting. Lydia walked toward him slowly. Jonas stepped back so she could see. "It ain't fancy," he murmured, rubbing the back of his neck. "But I figured maybe we needed something that says this place won't fall again." Lydia touched the carved groove of an agave leaf. Her fingers trembled, but not from fear. "It's beautiful," she whispered. Mira came running with a little tin of white paint. "Can I write it now?" Jonas grinned. "Go on, sweetheart." Mira dipped a brush and wrote one small word across the top beam. Home. Tommy planted a tiny agave sprout at the base, patting the dirt proudly. Jonas turned to Lydia, voice low, uncertain in a way that softened her chest. "You thinking about staying?" Lydia looked at the children, at the new gate, at Jonas, the man who had chosen them again and again, even when it hurt. "For the first time," she said softly, "I know exactly where I belong." Jonas's breath shook. He didn't touch her, not yet, but hope lit his eyes like dawn over the ridge. And under the crescent agave gate, the four of them stepped forward. Not fugitives, not survivors. A family, chosen, earned, and finally safe. Thank you for sharing this trail with me. Stories like this of courage, second chances, and folks choosing one another remind us that it's never too late to find a place where we belong. If this tale stirred something in your heart, please give it a like so more people can discover it. And if you'd enjoy more soft, healing Western stories, feel free to subscribe and ride along with us next time. I'd truly love to hear from you. Share a memory, a thought, or where you're watching from. Your voices make this community feel like home.